Yeah, so my background is I stumbled into caring and stumbled through caring for my mum. I worked in music for many years and came back. My mum, from people who started to get in touch with me to say they had some concerns about my mum. I had my own little concerns and kind of speaking to my mum from a distance. Uh, yeah, and came back to visit my mum. Thought I would take a little break and come back, and actually was taking a little break for me. I needed a little break, and you run back home to the people that love you in those moments, don't you? So that's what I was kind of doing, kind of running back for my mum, maybe to put her arms around me, and it never quite turned out that way for the first time. Maybe I thought I have to try and put my arms around my mum. Things are different. So I stumbled into caring and was only taking a short break, which turned in, a 2 month break, which became 4 months, a year, and then nearly 5 and a bit, nearly 6 years I stayed at home to care for my mum who'd been diagnosed with vascular dementia. Yeah, so I think I'll maybe start off with some of the more difficult experiences in this point. I think uh, part of me, I kind of was a bit of a blogger. I was kind of sharing and writing stories about the things that made us feel safe or scared, or, and actually, I was writing about my mum becoming invisible. People speaking over my mum to me as if my mum wasn't in the room. And actually, in the time it took me to write this piece, it took me a few weeks. In between that, we were both spoken over as if neither of us was in the room, and I found that upsetting. But I think the real difficult experiences were we struggled, like many people, from loneliness and isolation, and often a lack of understanding, and kind of flirted from crisis to crisis. And I woke up, and as I had done on other occasions, thinking I have no clue what I'm doing. And I took my mum by her hand to go to a health centre, and I cried walking to the bus holding my mum's hand, and I cried the whole way there on the bus holding my mum's hand, thinking I don't know how to do this, mum. I cried walking into the health centre, and there was quite a busy waiting room. And I walked up to the front desk and I said, please, can somebody help us? And I was asked, did I make an appointment? And I'm standing there with tears rolling down my face. And he said, everybody else is there's made an appointment. And handed me a little post-it sticker with a number on it. Kind of your whole life on a post-it sticker. And we walked back out that day with less hope, less belief, less opportunity than we walked in. Everybody in the bus could see we were struggling. The people in the waiting room could see we were struggling. And yeah, we travelled home with less hope, less belief, less understanding than we walked in. So for me, that was a really difficult experience of, how do you ask for help? Where do you ask for help? When you find a way to ask for help, are you listened to? I suppose other difficult experiences, my mum, I used to call her my wee shadow. My mum, everywhere I went in the house, my mum would be right beside me, and I was out hanging the washing up one day and my mum was right behind me, but my mum fell over a little paving round the grass, and my mum had lost the ability at that point to put her arms out to stop herself at the point we were with dementia, and kind of went on her head. And yeah, we rushed in a taxi to the A&E, and when we got to A&E, they started asking my mum questions like, do you know what day it is? Do you know who's the Prime Minister? And I was standing there saying, you're upsetting my mum. My mum didn't know the answers to those questions before she fell. You're scaring her. And I was handed a leaflet on head injuries and told to sit in the waiting room. That's really difficult, isn't it, when you're watching fear in your mum's eyes of being asked her name, her date of birth, and actually, if they'd spent a wee bit of time with me at that point, absolutely my mum needs to be listened to. But at that moment where my mum was living with dementia at that point, I was spoken to like a naughty school child, you know, and told to sit in the waiting room, that they are the experts. And actually, my mum was the expert in how she was feeling that day, and I could have helped her tell that story. So these are interactions that stay with me so often, of not feeling listened to, feeling invisible, separating. My goodness, we separating two people who you know, my mum felt safer when I was beside her. She, although she didn't recognise my name at that point, she recognised I cared about her, and she was my mum, you know, and we wouldn't separate a child at that point feeling that vulnerable and scared and alone. So why do we do it with our mums and dads in those moments? So those are really difficult experiences that kind of stay with me. For the good experiences, you know, there's many. You know, there was an incredible district nurse who came in one day when we were feeling struggling along the way, and kind of put her arms around my shoulders and told me I was doing okay, you know. And my goodness, just to be told you were doing okay and somebody believed in you a little bit when you were struggling in many ways to believe in yourself, when you were thinking, how do we do this? And but it was deeper than that. She said, I'm going to come and visit you every week, you know, and make sure you're both okay. And actually just knowing that that person was going to pop in and check in on us once a week took away some of the painful loneliness and isolation and fear, often fear that we were feeling. And I think for another remarkable experience, it was a speech and language therapist in the last weeks of my mum's life, when my mum was coming home, and I knew my mum was coming home for the last time, you know, and my mum was very, very poorly. And we couldn't quite get the mixtures between solids and liquids, and they were trying to show me how to do it in the hospital, the consistency for my mum swallowing, and had to be a certain consistency. And speech and language therapist said to me, you look terrified. And I said, I'm terrified, but I want to take my mum home. You know, my mum wants to go home. We've been at home all these years together. She goes, well, if you're ever really scared, here's my phone number. You just call me, you know. And we got home and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out, and I was panicking. It was a Friday, and what do we do? And in amongst the tears, I put my hand in my pocket, and that wee piece of paper was in my pocket with her number on it. And I phoned her up, and I said, I don't know what to do here. And she said to me, you know, where do you live? She goes, I pass your way every night going the way home. And there she did, and she came into her house and sat for a few hours. I soon found out later she never passed her house. She went the complete opposite direction. My goodness, how beautiful is that? I mean, how remarkable of an understanding of another human being feeling alone, two people feeling scared. That's what makes care beautiful, isn't it? Those complete moments of understanding, listening, and encouraging and supporting are beautiful, and they stay in your memory forever. And I suppose they're really important, aren't they? Because recovery is important as well. And if those moments are wrong, if those moments go differently, they stay with you for the rest of your life. But actually, part of me feels okay in those moments because we weren't alone. Because some people who work in health and social care recognise those moments. Yeah, so they're really important. Moments are really, really important in health and social care. Yeah, it's a good question. So they make a difference in both of those moments, don't they? Often, I think sometimes, and I say this in the many thousands of letters, you know, that I've received. Part of my campaign was to ask people to share their stories. That actually people are quite lonely. Lots of us feel quite alone and lonely, you know, not just living caring. And often the only people we would see is when my mum was more able, if we went to the clinic for her blood checks for her diabetes, or to the GPs, or to a hospital appointment, or to the shops, is the only time we'd really see people. It's a funny thing when you care long time, or I think lots of people living with long-term conditions, people who used to visit don't visit as often, and people who used to pop in for a cup of tea don't pop in, you know. And I was always interested in the conversation of, you know where I really am, if you know where I am if you really need me. And I used to think, well, I didn't used to have to need you to see you. So what happens when people are poorly for long times? So those moments are really important, because sometimes that can be the only conversation you have with someone that week. So it has the opportunity to lift your spirit, your courage, your chance. And sometimes you go from a space of, I'm not sure how we can make it through today. Now, if that meeting of two people is wrong, making it through today feels really harder, so does the next day and the next day. But actually, if those moments of kindness and understanding, you can flip from, we can do this, I can see tomorrow, I can see the next day, and I can see the next day. And that's the important impact, the beauty of the impact that people who work in health and social care can every day. So in amongst a busy day of maybe you seeing 5, 6, 10, 15 people, those 5, 10, 15 minutes might be the only 15 minutes that person speaks to someone that day, that week, that month. So yeah, they either lift you up, you know, and encourage you and enthuse you and help you on that pathway, or sometimes it can make that pathway feel steeper, more difficult, and sometimes impossible to climb. Well, firstly, thank you. I think it's the first thing I'd like to say to them, for being part of these beautiful and valuable and precious professions. I'd like to thank anyone listening to this who works in health and social care for doing it yesterday. I'd like to thank them for doing it today, and I'd like to thank them for doing it again tomorrow. And I'd like to remind them that whatever their role is in health and social care, that they have the opportunity and potential to transform people's days, lives, and experiences. And my goodness, what an incredible professions to be part of, what an incredible gift to have. But actually, it becomes a beautiful gift when you hand it over to our mums and our dads and our families and our children, isn't it? So I suppose my message is thank you. We think you're remarkable. And where would we be without you? So thank you for caring for and about us.